Say your RRSP sits at $800,000. You are still putting in $1,500 every month because every retirement calculator you have ever opened tells you the same thing. Keep going. Add more. But there is a number those calculators never show you, and it is $50,000. That is roughly what staying in save mode past a certain point can cost you in taxes you never had to pay. Here is the mechanism nobody walks you through. Somewhere between age 58 and 64, most people pass through a window where their income is lower than at any point since their 20s. The job is gone or winding down. CPP and OAS have not started yet. If you keep stuffing money into an RRSP through those years instead of pulling some out, you are trading a tax rate you will never see again for a much higher one the government hands you later, whether you want it or not. People who work with this every day call it an RRSP to TFSA pipeline. It is not a product and it is not a trick. It means withdrawing part of your RRSP while your income is low, paying tax on it at that low rate, and moving what is left into your TFSA, where it grows and comes out untouched for the rest of your life. In the next few minutes, I will walk through the math on why stopping the RRSP contributions now and building that pipeline instead can be worth six figures over the rest of your retirement. Not because you did anything wrong by saving, because the rules quietly change once you stop earning a paycheck and almost nobody adjusts their plan to match. If you are somewhere between 55 and 65, and you have been asking yourself at what point you can stop saving for retirement, hit subscribe, because by the end of this video, you will know the exact number that tells you when you have already won the game. The concrete cost looks like this. A couple who keeps contributing to their RRSP past age 60, instead of pulling some money out early and moving it into a TFSA, can lose more than $50,000 in taxes over the rest of their retirement. That is not because they did anything reckless. It comes down to how RRIF withdrawals get forced on you later, whether your income needs them or not. Standard advice says save as much as you can, for as long as you can. That advice made sense while you were working and paying tax at your highest rate. It stops making sense the moment you retire, because your income actually drops, sometimes by half, and that drop only lasts for a few years. I've watched this happen to plenty of people who did everything right for 30 years and still got blindsided by it. Most people never use that window. They keep contributing out of habit, then get hit with a bigger tax bill later that habit created. Between the year you stop working and the year you turn 71, when the government forces you to convert your RRSP into a RRIF and start withdrawing, you usually have your lowest taxable income in decades. No paycheck, no CPP or OAS yet if you have not started them. That gap is the cheapest tax bracket you will ever sit in again. Every dollar left sitting in the RRSP through those years is a dollar taxed later at a rate you do not control. Picture $800,000 sitting in an RRSP, left untouched until the mandatory withdrawals start. Those forced withdrawals alone push you into a bracket that costs you real money every single year going forward. Now compare that to someone who drew $40,000 a year out earlier, paid a lower rate while their income was low, and moved the rest into a TFSA instead. Over 20 years, the gap between those two paths runs past $100,000. This is not about being a bad saver. It is about being a smart tax planner instead of an automatic one. The system that told you to keep contributing was built for the accumulation years, not for the years right after you stop earning a paycheck, and nobody updates you on that shift unless you go looking for it. The trade you are making without realizing it is simple. Keep saving on autopilot, and you protect your account balance today while quietly building a bigger tax bill for your 70s. Draw it down earlier instead, and you give up a little control now in exchange for keeping far more of your own money later. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada puts out guidance encouraging exactly this kind of review. Looking at your withdrawal order well before age 71, not scrambling once the RRIF minimum kicks in. That matters because once you hit 71, the decision is made for you. Before that, it is still yours. But here is where most people get stuck, and it has nothing to do with the math. The moment you hear stop saving, your brain hears start spending, and that is the wrong picture entirely. What you are actually supposed to do with that money looks nothing like spending it. Withdrawing money from an RRSP and depositing what is left into a TFSA is not spending. It is relocating your own money from one box the government taxes into another box it never touches again. Once that cash sits inside a TFSA, it grows tax-free, it comes out tax-free, and it does not count as income for OAS clawback or GIS purposes. That last part matters more than people realize. OAS starts getting clawed back once your net income passes roughly $95,323 a year. RRIF withdrawals count toward that number. TFSA withdrawals do not. So the same dollar sitting in the wrong account can trigger a clawback that costs you thousands, while sitting in the right account, it costs you nothing at all. Most people in their 60s have far more TFSA room than they think. The annual limit is $7,000, but unused room keeps building every year, going all the way back to when you turned 18 or 2009, whichever comes later. Say you withdraw $40,000 from your RRSP in a given year and pay 20% tax on it. You are left with $32,000 to move into your TFSA. Do that for 10 years, and you have shifted $320,000 into a space where it never gets taxed again, no matter how much it grows. I used to think the goal was simple. Max out the RRSP every single year for as long as possible. I was wrong about that, and it took a client to show me why. He came in at 71 with $1,200,000 sitting in his RRSP, proud of the number. But the forced withdrawals pushed him straight into the top bracket and triggered an OAS clawback he never saw coming. He paid more than $50,000 in extra tax that single year on money he had no choice about touching. That single tax season wiped out years of careful, disciplined contributions in one stroke. That is not a story about him doing anything wrong. He did exactly what he was told to do for 40 years. The problem was that nobody told him the plan needed to change once the withdrawals stopped being optional. Now, you might be wondering what happens if you start this pipeline and the market drops right in the middle of it. That is a fair worry, and honestly, it is exactly why the timing of when you start matters more than most people assume. Go back to 2000 through 2012. The S&P TSX composite basically went nowhere over that entire stretch once you account for inflation. Anyone who kept contributing to their RRSP through those years was buying in at high prices and then forced to sell into a market that had barely moved, sometimes right when they needed the income most. Someone who had already started moving money out of their RRSP and into a TFSA before that stretch hit was in a different position. They were withdrawing from the RRSP while prices were still reasonable and depositing into the TFSA on the same terms. The flat decade hurt less because their plan did not depend on the market cooperating with a specific date. Their income for those years was already decided in advance. So a sideways market was an inconvenience instead of a crisis. History does not repeat on a schedule, but slow decades do happen, and they tend to arrive without much warning. Planning around a fixed withdrawal window protects you from needing the market to behave in order for your own plan to work. One number is worth sitting with. Statistics Canada puts life expectancy for a 60-year-old man at around 84 and for a 60-year-old woman at around 87. That works out to 25 years or more of withdrawals for most people, not the 10 or 15 years that used to be the rough assumption. That 25-year horizon is exactly why the order you take money out in matters more than the total amount you manage to save. A quarter century gives you room to control which years you pay tax in instead of letting one forced formula decide it for you. Time to stress test this properly. What actually happens if you ignore all of this and keep saving the way you always have? And what happens if you follow the pipeline instead? Once you see both outcomes side by side, the difference is hard to unsee. Picture the first path. At 60, you have $800,000 in the RRSP, and you keep adding to it every month because that is what you have always done. By 71, forced withdrawals push a big share of your income into a higher tax bracket every year for the rest of your life, and that keeps happening whether you need the money that year or not. Over 20 years, the extra tax on that pattern adds up to roughly $350,000 money that's simply never needed to leave your family. And when you eventually pass away with a large RRIF balance still sitting there, the entire thing gets taxed as income in that final year, sometimes at the highest rate that exists. Now picture the second path. At 60, you stop adding to the RRSP and start withdrawing $40,000 a year instead, paying a lower rate while your income is low, and moving what is left into the TFSA. By 71, your RRSP is down to around $400,000. Your forced withdrawal is much smaller, and you stay out of the higher bracket entirely. Your TFSA, meanwhile, has grown past $500,000, completely untouched by tax. Run both paths over 20 years, and the gap in total tax paid comes out to roughly $250,000 in favor of the second path. That is not a rounding error. That is the difference between a plan that reacts to the rules and one that works with them. None of this is free. The second path means paying some tax earlier than you technically have to, and it means people who have been trained never to touch a certain account have to consciously start pulling money out of it. What you get in exchange is control over when you pay, protection from the OAS clawback, and a tax-free reserve sitting in the TFSA for whatever comes later. And speaking of whatever comes later, the biggest fear I hear from people your age is not about tax brackets at all. It is the question of what happens if you need $3,000 a month for a care home. That is a real risk, and it happens to be the one thing most retirement calculators leave out completely. Say a bear market hits at 62 and your portfolio drops 30%. If you had kept everything in the RRSP and never started moving money out, your $800,000 balance is suddenly closer to $560,000, and the instinct is to freeze. Most people stop everything at that point, including any plan they had to draw the RRSP down earlier, and they end up waiting until 71 anyway, right into the years when CPP and OAS both kick in and push their income up regardless. Now picture someone who already had 2 years of this pipeline running. They have already moved roughly $64,000 into the TFSA before the drop ever happened. That money is untouched by the crash because it is sitting in cash or stable investments inside the TFSA, not in whatever fell 30%. They keep going, withdrawing from the RRSP while prices are down and moving the after-tax amount into the TFSA at the same low prices. The TFSA also becomes something else in a moment like this, a reserve that does not affect your OAS, no matter how much you pull from it. That matters because a private room in a long-term care facility in Canada can run $3,000 a month or more. A TFSA with $200,000 in it covers years of that cost without triggering a single dollar of clawback or bumping you into a higher bracket. This is not about assuming the worst is coming. It is about noticing that the person with money already sitting in a TFSA has more room to breathe when something unexpected shows up, whether that is a market drop or a health cost nobody planned for. So how do you actually build something like this for yourself? It is not complicated, but it comes down to a handful of specific steps, and the order you do them in matters. Start by figuring out your own low-income window. Take the year you plan to stop working, or slow down significantly and count forward to age 71. since that is when RRIF withdrawals become mandatory. If you retire at 60, that is 11 years, roughly from 60 to 70, where you have more control over your taxable income than you will ever have again. Next, work out how much to pull from the RRSP each year. The goal is staying under the OAS clawback threshold, which sits around $95,323, and ideally, staying inside the lowest tax bracket you can manage. If your yearly expenses run about $50,000 and you plan to hold off on CPP and OAS until 65, withdrawing that same $50,000 from the RRSP each year keeps you comfortably inside a lower bracket instead of a higher one. Finally, move whatever is left after tax into your TFSA. If you have room, and most people your age do, use it. If you do not have enough room in a given year, wait for January, when new contribution room opens up. Whatever you do, do not park that money in a regular taxable account, since that just creates a new stream of income the government can tax all over again. I had a client, we will call him Dave, who was 62 with $900,000 in his RRSP and $50,000 in his TFSA. He was terrified of stopping his contributions. When we ran the numbers, the pipeline saved him roughly $120,000 in lifetime tax. He is 68 now, his TFSA has grown to around $300,000, and he has never paid a cent of OAS clawback. I remember the first time I told a client to stop contributing to their RRSP. He looked at me like I had lost my mind. Every book he had ever read said save more, not less. The math was clear, but I still had to unlearn my own instinct that more saving always means more safety. Even once you understand every one of those steps, there is still one more obstacle standing in the way, and it has nothing to do with numbers. It is what happens in your head the moment you actually try to stop. After 20 or 30 years of disciplined saving, your brain quietly starts treating saving as the same thing as being responsible, and spending as the same thing as being reckless. That shortcut kept you safe while you were building the account. It stops helping you the moment you switch from building it to actually using it. If you feel a flicker of guilt at the idea of pulling money out of your RRSP on purpose, you are not alone in that. I have sat across from people who got emotional at the idea of touching an account they had protected for 3 decades. That reaction is not weakness. It is what a successful saver feels the first time they have to become a successful spender instead. None of that makes you careless with money. It makes you someone who spent 30 years training a habit that now needs a small update. Try reframing what you are actually doing. You are not stopping your saving. You are changing where it lives. Moving money from the RRSP to the TFSA is still saving. It is just saving in an account the government cannot reach later. Some people find it easier to think of it as a relocation rather than a withdrawal, because that is closer to what is actually happening to the money. It sounds like a small language change, but it tends to be the difference between someone who freezes and someone who actually follows through. Once that shift clicks, the math stops feeling complicated at all. One last thought ties this together. So here is the whole framework in one place. The years between 58 and 64 tend to be your best opportunity to move money out of an RRSP at a low tax rate. The RRSP to TFSA pipeline can be worth $50,000 or more in taxes you never have to pay. It protects you from the OAS clawback, and it gives you a tax-free reserve sitting there for whatever life throws at you later, including long-term care. None of it requires a dramatic life change, just a different order of operations for money you already have. If you are between 55 and 65, and you are still wondering exactly when to stop saving, hit subscribe. I will keep breaking down exactly how to work through numbers like these for your own situation. Let me know in the comments. At what age did you actually stop saving or slow down? And if you have not stopped yet, tell me honestly what is holding you back. You have already won the game in the sense that matters most, simply by getting this far with money still on the table. Now it is just a matter of playing the second half by a different set of rules than the first.